Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com, and we're back for another Dynamics AX to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations Upgrade Journeys podcast episode. And once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Peter Joeckel of Turn On Dynamics. Hey, Peter.
Jason, good day to you. Another great topic today and some great guests. I'm thinking we're going to get some good information.
Yeah, I think the real nice thing about today's episode, these are smaller companies that have run AX for quite a while. They really know what the future holds in terms of where finance and operations is at, but they definitely have some decisions to make around where each of their companies is going to go, what kind of moves they're going to make to really get there, because it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be necessarily straightforward to make it work in the context of where they're at today, right?
Yeah, and my guess is there are a lot of companies in the AX world that fit this scenario. What kind of we've termed that AXSMB, that smaller company that needs the enterprise level functionality, but probably wanted to spend mid-market ERP software dollars and resources. So interesting scenario, but like I said, I think there's probably a lot of companies out there in that boat.
All right, well, let's dive in and get to know a little more about our guests today. Yeah, so today is a great theme. We have two guests who are Dynamics AX customers. Could you help me introduce them?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of friends of mine, TJ Phelps and Chris George, and what we'll do is we'll allow them to kind of introduce themselves. Really interesting. They're both customers of, obviously AX implementations on 2009, and they fall into what I call the AXSMB market space. So we can talk a little bit more about that after we've introduced these guys. But their situations are very similar in terms of where they are with their implementation and some of the things that they're facing. Having to make this decision on where to take their current implementation. In the wake of this feverish excitement over the D365. So very similar manufacturing companies of, very complex amount of work that needs to be done in their software, but they also have some very interesting differences, that makes them unique. And so very similar at the same time, very unique. And so those are some of the things we can, talk to them about, and then, hear about their experiences, up to this point and kind of the decisions that they face going forward.
All right, excellent. Well, why don't we throw things open to some introductions? So like you mentioned, Chris George, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little about yourself and your company?
Yeah, I'm the IT and accounting manager at Smith Pump Company. We're a pump distributor. We manufactured sewage treatment plants, lift stations, control panels, almost anything to do with water and wastewater. We do service, we do parts, we have inventory. We sell straight off the shelf, but we use that inventory also for the repairs and the construction of the sewage treatment plants or lift stations.
All right, excellent. You're on AX 2009. You said you work in both AX and accounting, and just going by the theme of today's discussion, I guess you have a smaller AX implementation than some AX customers out there.
Right. We have 35 users.
Okay.
So we're a 65 employee company with 4 locations. Our main office is in Waco, Texas.
All right, great. Well, welcome. And hey, TJ, thanks for joining us as well.
Hey, Jason.
And not too far away from Chris, I understand.
No, just right up the road, actually, just north of Dallas a little bit.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit about your role, your company, and your company's use of Dynamics AX?
Sure. So my name is TJ Phelps. I'm the IT director here at ALT Fabrication. the way we use AX is kind of mostly for manufacturing, but we use it for pretty much everything that's in there. Pretty much production, purchasing, sales orders. You know, obviously accounting, inventory. Got to have all that stuff. Our company, we produce a lot of stuff, but the two things that we produce mainly is parts for the cell tower industry, like the towers, you know, cell towers, AT&T, T-Mobile, you know, all the major players. And then we have a sister company that does lightning protection, and we manufacture the parts that they use. So it's kind of a nice little symmetry there.
All right, excellent. And I don't know if you guys saw the nice article that Peter wrote recently about some of the challenges and the maybe concerns that that AX customers are facing today, especially when they're mature, sophisticated companies, but they're perhaps on the smaller end of what the AX solution and certainly the D365 finance and operations solution is meant to accommodate, I guess you'd say. Peter, did you have Chris or TJ's companies in mind when you were writing that? And are there any kind of points that you raised in that recent article? And we'll link to it here in the podcast summary. But from that you would call out as we get started here?
Yeah, I think I specifically had both of those guys in mind. And, you know, a lot of companies similar to them because actually, you know, they fall into this very unique situation where, you know, back in the day when they were out looking for software, you know, they probably wanted to get Great Plains, right? Because from a cost standpoint, right? You know, complexity of implementation. But when they looked around and said, well, here's all the things that we need to do as a business. Oh my gosh, you know, if we're going to do this Great Plains thing, then we're going to be stuck in this, you know, that typical what I think of, you know, 3 ERP implementations that a typical company goes through, right? They start with QuickBooks and then they torture QuickBooks and then they move to that middle, you know, that SMB package like a Great Plains back in the day. And then when they outgrow that, they go to a enterprise level solution like AX. But some of these companies, you know, rightfully take a look and they say to themselves, if we install this, you know, SMB level package, then what we're going to do is we're going to miss on crucial functionality that's going to hamper us from a standpoint of things we need to do and where we need to grow. And so what they do is they bite the bullet and they, you know, go to what's more of an enterprise level solution, correctly so from a standpoint of having to, you know, have this functionality. What's interesting is, you know, not having the types of resources that a bigger company has, you know, as far as keeping the software moving forward in an environment like we're in right now, where the costs of going from where they are currently to that D365 can be prohibitive, right? And so it's kind of that catch-22 scenario for me, where you need the functionality, but the software that meets those requirements is, you know, probably from a cost and, you know, resource standpoint is probably, you know, more than you want to chew off at any one point. So there's a lot of companies, I believe, that, you know, went with the AX solution at some point. They're going to find themselves specifically in this position. And then, you know, I think what makes it more challenging is if a lot of these companies went this route because of functional requirements, that means they're going to be heavily modified, right? Or have heavy requirements. And what we have found, obviously, in our upgrade experience is how expensive these projects are. So now you're looking at, oh my gosh, are we looking at a company that spent X to implement this software and to potentially do an upgrade? It may be some number times X, right? So a very, 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 very unique situation. And I think it's, you know, while they have, you know, great similarities, they also have some differences that we can talk about that make them interesting to talk about. But, you know, I really want people to hear, you know, their situation and their thoughts on this, because I think it hits a lot of folks in the industry.
Well, Peter, you hit the nail on the head for our company. We I mean, you said it perfect when you said we are big enough that we have a need to have that software and to have that functionality, but we're right in that gap where we're small enough that it's difficult to dedicate resources towards it, and that's kind of the hole we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and we're in the exact same spot. We did look at GP Great Plains and said it won't work. There's just too much that it won't handle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to go, with AX. So, and we're in that exact spot, just like Peter said.
And when we started, we were actually on the AX version. I think it was AX3 when it was with Navision. We were on AX3 for a while, and then we made the jump to AX 2009, which was a great improvement. But now we found ourselves in the position of we're kind of maxed out on AX 2009, needing to go to 2012 or D365 or some variant. And so that's we're rehashing these same issues all over again. So that's right where we're at.
Yeah, and very similar shoes, but one thing that's kind of a big difference between the two, which is interesting, as I said, same positions, but some nuances that are different between the two companies. So on the one hand, you have very heavily modified code, because if you take a look at the work that they do at Smith Pump, it is probably the most complicated type of company to automate. Not only are you selling inventory, kind of like a distributor, and not only are you manufacturing things, but you're custom manufacturing things, and you're engineering to order projects, and then you have teams going out to do the implementation of those projects, and then you have the maintenance work, right? And then you have repair business. So all of those things from a job costing standpoint, never mind the core manufacturing inventory components, those are brutally complex, right? And now take a step back and try to quote these things, right, from that sales process, to go from that sales quoting, into, carrying these types of projects forward. The level of modifications on that is incredibly complex, right? And then one of the things that I see, with TJ's business that, as a manufacturing guy all these years, I've seen in a lot of, and this isn't unique at all to AX, but one of the things that I see a lot in that mid-market manufacturing space is there is a lot of core manufacturing distribution functionality that never got implemented correctly. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the big reasons is that a lot of the mid-market guys implementing software came from the accounting world. And so they did a great job on, GL, AP, AR, and then not so good a job on inventory. And then again, not really so good again in the manufacturing side. So, similar situations, heavily modified, however, on one side, and the other side, underutilizing functionality. And so both of those are different challenges in, the direction they're thinking of going with the software.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know about. I mean, when I hear running AX 2009 in 2019, I think it must be a little scary, given the sort of support situation. And I do wonder, have you talked to Microsoft? Have you talked to folks like Peter and maybe talked within the company and tried to forge a plan to move ahead? Chris, maybe start with you.
Yeah, we started, realizing that the upgrade would greatly enhance our productivity. There's features that we saw that have been added especially for manufacturing. We thought, we can use all these features. We need to look at upgrading. So we said, let's figure out where we want to go. And that was about the time the 365 was released. And we said, well, we might as well go with the latest and greatest version, because it's going to be a while before we do it anyway. Let's start gathering information. We gathered information for a while, figured out, this is something we want to look at. And then we started talking to our partner about, well, what's the cost going to be? And we actually got quotes from two partners, that were very similar to what Peter said, 2.5 times the original implementation budget. And, our jaws just hit the floor because, as a small company, small business, we really can't sink $500,000 into a project like this. So it was quite a bit of sticker shock.
All right. So right now you're sort of gathering yourself back up off the floor and trying to figure out what's next.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We're trying to figure out, okay, now how do we do this, and how do we come up with those resources to to figure out a way to do this, and we're not there yet.
When you
So
look
Jason,
at
if you look in the newspapers and see that rash of bank robberies in the Waco area,
right,
those are completely unrelated.
right.
Exactly.
Someone to look at.
Oh, and Chris, just as a follow up, when you do look at the latest software, or maybe like your executive team looks at it, and how it's different, and how it's similar, is the conversation about it ever about changing the way you do business, or is it really about just the supportability and the sort of modernizing versus modernizing plus a lot of change to the business?
Yeah, the whole goal has, after we did all these modifications to 2009, we kind of figured out that was not the right way we should have gone.
Mm-hmm.
We should have gone with, third-party softwares and add-ons and figured out how to do some of the stuff we were doing differently. And so the goal for this upgrade is to try to do it with the base product without doing all the customizations that we did the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a part of what's making it more complicated, is that, we've got to figure out, all right, how do we do our quoting? How do we do our projects? How do we do the field work, and all interrelated to how we do it now, and trying to come up with the best way to do it in 365.
All right, yeah. So that's the kind of, so you're in that assessment stage right now, trying to look for a third
Correct.
way or a second way.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, looking at it logically, there's probably not an upgrade project here. This is probably more suited to a reimplementation,
Right.
because the upgrade would be ruinous, from the complexity standpoint.
TJ, does that have any similarities to what your company is looking at? You're also on 2009. Where do you see things going?
There's a little similarity. Ours is a little bit different, though. We did look at upgrading a few years ago, and sadly, where we're at now is not so much because of functionality or just some of the improvements that we can get in the new system. I mean, the biggest trigger that's brought us to this point where we're at now is that we've maxed out on our licenses, and we need to get more. So we're at that point where we've got to surge forward. And same thing, that Chris said is we did kind of have some sticker shock when looking at some of the prices for doing some of these projects. I feel a little bit differently on the customizations, and this might be my IT side showing in me a little bit. I'm actually okay with doing customizations, but I've learned a lot from these last 13 years of using AX and what I would do different. I mean, one of the first things that I want to do is keep track in a lot better way of what customizations we've made. And on note with, on par with Chris's note, I definitely want to use built-in functionality for, what it can do. If there's already a function to do what we're trying to do, I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel to do that. And so I think that's, knowing that going forward is just part of the battle, is just knowing, trying to find out, hey, is this a built-in function? And I think that's where knowing guys like Peter can be a huge help, because having him as a contact and a resource, we can say, hey, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Is this something that we need to customize, or is this something that there is a built-in function for? But it's how we've got here over the years. I mean, I've dove into AX pretty deep, pretty thoroughly, and I mean, it's on one side I've got to see some of the power that it can do. I mean, I don't think anybody will dispute AX is a powerful software. I mean, the rabbit hole goes very deep on it. But like Peter said, though, we have some implementations that were just we implemented them not the best from the beginning, and so what we've seen years later is how that's played out. And I think if we just would going forward, knowing that and learning from that, if we can implement this next round differently, we can learn from our previous mistakes. So and my biggest thing, probably the biggest challenge or the biggest goal that I'm really going after with going forward, whether we go on an AX 2012 or a D365, I really want to go after automation. Automation, I think, is the way of the future. I think anybody who's not at least entertaining, looking at automation might be behind the curve a little bit. We've implemented some processes over here that use automation heavily, and it's once you get it down right, I mean, you can really do some amazing things and just clear up so much time. So that's one of my fun goals that I like to really aim towards. So that's kind of some of my hopes are.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. I mean, I just came from a Microsoft conference, and that's the thing that I mean, that's the thing everyone else is talking about too, which I think is good, because if Microsoft's thinking about it, hopefully they do have more answers for you about technology that can do that, both inside of F&O and maybe even outside of it, that they're building in. Any particular areas that you really have your eye on, TJ?
Yeah. So we're kind of in a unique spot because like I said before, we have two companies here.
Yeah.
One company is our primary manufacturing. They're the primary user of AX, but the sister company is kind of a construction company, but they too have a place where we can roll AX in. So we have AX 2009 as our primary implementation, but we also have an AX 2012 install that we're actually running live right now. We did a few years ago that we ran HR and payroll on, and right now we're only using it for the manufacturing side, but we've really been looking at it at trying to bring in a sister company to use that for payroll and HR. And there's so much symmetry there because our construction side of the company, every single part that they use, I mean, like literally everything, office supplies, products in the field, everything, they get from ALT Fabrication. They get from our manufacturing side. And so there's a lot there that can be done in terms of automation, streamline. There's one of the big things that I've got my eye on, I'm trying to eliminate, is we have a lot of manual processes. We have a lot of processes that we're just using a lot of paper processes. We actually have people right now that their primary function is just printing paper and shuffling around paper amongst the floor, and we're really trying to eliminate that so that we can better use their time doing things that are more productive rather than just these manual repetitive processes. So that's one big area. Another big area that kind of staples onto that. I'm really big into, I want to start using barcodes. Somehow we've managed to go all this time and not implement barcodes. So that's hopefully going to be changing a little bit. And I've kind of teased Peter about this a little bit. I know it's not going to be the easiest of things to do, but I'm really anxious about RFIDs. I've seen some really exciting things that can be done with RFID, and I think in some areas we are a good candidate for it. So
I'm anxious to kind of see what how that plays out. But it really on our on our business model and what we do, there's really a wide range of things that or a wide range of the modules that we can use. I mean, we're a manufacturer, we're a wholesaler, a drop shipper, a retailer. So we have a need for things like like a POS system. That would be a great benefit to us. Barcoding, the credit card module, we never used that. We never implemented that, and I'd really like to start doing that. Being that we ship straight out of our distribution facility, we did integrate FedEx integration a while back with AX. That one was huge. That one was a huge help for us. So I'm definitely keeping that going forward. So yeah, it's really just streamlining processes is really what it's about, and it's just saving time is really the key goal there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that you could you could go to a new system and not and leave paper processes in place to much of an extent.
Yeah.
It's sorry, Chris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, we're almost in the exact same boat. I mean, we have manual timesheets still that are entered the next day, so you don't know what was done on a project until afternoon the next day.
Right.
We have, barcoding is we've talked about for 15 years. It's one of the things our warehouse manager wants to do, but we've just never figured out how to do it cost effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our processes are manual. Just like TJ said, it's lots of paper that floats around throughout the shop for every single project. And we are ISO 9001, so we have to control every bit of that paper for those projects. So if one change is made, it becomes a complicated process to make sure it's replaced in the paperwork that's floating around on the floor.
So and so to go to to build in more automation is the same. It still has that challenge. You then have to just document how you still are compliant with the new technological approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Jason.
Yeah.
Jason, I was going to tell you on the paper process. One thing that we did, and this kind of ties back into what Peter was saying about some of the things that we implemented. We kind of did it a little differently. One of the things we did is all of our some of our papers that we print every day, our packing slips, our pick tickets, we have to scan those back into our system at the end of every day and attach it to every sales order, PO, whatever the source was. And we were spending just a huge amount of time. I mean, you can imagine, scanning in one or two papers at a time, naming it, saving it, and then, attaching it to the dock handler just one at a time. So what we did to try to at least eliminate a little of that was we started doing document management where we could tag our documents, like have it print out with a barcode on the documents, like on the pick tickets or the packing slips. And then we have a little process in place. This is some of that automation I was telling you about that just was, when you see it come into full gear, it really is exciting. We have it now to where all of our pick tickets and packing slips, they're all tagged with a barcode. So at the end of every day, we can take a whole stack of these, of these pick tickets and packing slips and whatnot, and just scan them into a mailbox. And 10 minutes later, they're right where they have to be in AX attached to every order. We have an automated process that splits that out. And that's great. That saves us a lot of time. But I completely hear what Peter's saying, that that's one way of doing it. But I think there's other ways of even getting more refined and even more efficient than having to do it that way. To get rid of the paper altogether would be even better. So that's some of that kind of stuff is where I'm really hoping that we go in some of the areas that we dive into.
One thing I wonder, well, really for both of you, and TJ, maybe I'll put it to you first, is is I love I love talking about the stuff and the automation opportunities and the better document management and all those things. Do you feel like you have you like sold your company on it? Have you sold executive level people on the need for these kinds of improvements?
I have now. It's been a long time coming. We've been talking about it for a long time, and with anything, there's a cost obviously that has to be factored in there, and I think most people would probably agree that IT most of the time is a cost spending department rather than a cost generating. And so it's been a long time coming, but where we're at now is we've kind of butted up against a ledge where our company has grown quite a bit over the last 6 to 12 months. And so a lot of the places where we're having pain points, they really kind of, rise to the surface themselves, so that everybody can see them, because it becomes very apparent as you start to grow. Okay, here are the things that are taking me longer, or here are the places where I'm having to hire 2 or 3 more guys just because we don't have a technology solution in place to handle those things. So it's where we're at right now. I mean, we're still putting the total implementation together as a proposal, but I don't think I have much trouble with buy-off. I mean, we even, one of the things that was a little surprising that came up the other day we were talking about is we have our total item number count in our system is about 14 to 15,000, and we deal a lot. We build items, but we also we stock most of the items that we have, and so our min maxes are a huge part of our business, and it's anyone who's an accounting person out there will tell you that it's a huge part of your cost of what value you're keeping on your shelves and how much basically money you have out there afloat. One of the things that came up was the idea of automating our min-max reviews. The way we've done it for years is every day when our master plan reruns and regenerates, we have a person or a couple of different people who review all the items that come up, and we basically look at them and say, have they been reviewed in 6 months? If so, then, or if not, then apply a formula to reassess what our min max needs to be. And now we're finally in talks of automating that and with executive buy-off on doing so. So I mean, that was a big, I mean, when that came down, that was really a big leap forward, because that really showed me that people all around have really seen that the amount of time that we spend doing this process that can completely be automated can be done. And anyone out there who's really thinking about automation, I mean, the best advice I would give you is you can automate, but you want to have your checks going with it. Like when we have when we're getting ready to do this, we're going to automate setting these min maxes, but we're going to have reporting that follows it so that we can see what happens each and every day. So we're still going to have someone reviewing a little bit, but the difference is the amount of time that you're spending is a fraction of what you were spending. So yeah, I think everyone here is on board with going that route.
Hey, Jason, the underlying question of that question that you just asked, is management on board, is that the fact that ERP implementations are exhausting. They're exhausting from a standpoint of how much money it takes, how much time it takes, the resources, the emotional investment you have in doing these things. And so when you step away from, the annual, Microsoft happy get-togethers where you have all these wonderful new things that everybody should implement ASAP, the reality of the situation is that most people are operating systems at an exhaustion level. And that exhaustion level is, it took us so long and so much money to get the basic system up and running. And somebody somewhere decided, you can print checks and invoices. Okay, no more. We're going to stop right here.
Right.
Okay. And so the problem there is that everybody has that experience of how did they got that to that point, right? And they're short of all this next level, these next couple of steps where they could add some, functionality to that core they have installed that would dramatically have an impact, not only on, how they're using the software, but literally on the bottom line. And so there, this is probably, endemic to our industry, that these kinds of implementations to a lot of folks, because of experience, they look like costs. And you really need to break through where it's not a cost situation, where these things become strategic weapons that are actually making you money and saving you money, where it's no longer, a cost. Think about it this way. An ERP implementation for, a company managing inventory and doing manufacturing should be like that bigger, better new machine that you have on the shop floor. Something that's cutting metal faster, more efficiently, right? Doing all these cool things for you. Yeah, it costs a lot of money, but it's doing all this great stuff. Most people don't look at these new and improved ERP systems in the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. The one thing that, speaking of shiny things at conferences, I mean, I can just tell you from being it, just coming from one, this the DIY sort of app building for like peripheral or secondary applications to do small functions on a role, based on one particular role or one particular sort of task. That's where really Microsoft wants to push things. And also, I think building, automating small processes in the same way, to automating a sort of a small scale element and letting someone, within the company build it rather than hiring a consultant to do it. That seems to be where Microsoft wants things to go.
Are they still using the term the citizen developer?
They are, yeah, citizen developer. They're talking about it's from power user to citizen developer to pro developer. That's sort of the spectrum that they like to talk about now.
That's the stage, huh?
Yeah, that's where they're at in their messaging.
Yes, that's our next podcast where I share my viewpoint.
But it is intoxicating. You go to an event and you hear what some companies are doing, and look, it tends to be very big, well-funded companies that have a lot of the best stories, because they have these, they can throw 30 people onto an ERP team internally and start formulating some of these plans, which is not, if you're a massive energy company, you can do that, and not a 65-person company.
Jason, you know what would be a great exercise someday? Taking a movie crew behind the scenes of all of these, where these guys are developing all of these demos, for these conferences, to show you what's actually happening, to create those videos, to create those PowerPoints, to create those demos. I think that would be eye-opening.
Well, I was at this last one I was at. The big demo now is mixed reality demos, and not to take it too far aside here, but they've had a couple of failures. Not that like the HoloLens mixed reality, not that doesn't work, but they try, for demo purposes, they try to put like a camera on stage with that sort of films it with the hologram sort of mixed in, so that just to make it look better for people who are viewing it from afar. And that camera part never works. It's not that I guess the HoloLens is working, so they say, but the camera system doesn't. And then it just like it blows up the demos, and they have to run a taped version of it, because and I think it happened at Ignite or one of the really big Microsoft events, and it just happened last week too. I mean, I think it's a real sort of roll of the dice these days with some of these demos. But having been in that world as well, I do not want to see a behind the scenes about it. I want to just leave. I personally want to just leave it behind. I've been on my own share of demo failures over the years.
Well, we have gotten way off track, but I think anybody listening to this, this thing, I've gotten a tremendous amount of, understanding from Chris and TJ that, for anybody in a similar situation, there's, tons of good stuff that's been shared here today. So I thought it's been fantastic.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Peter, TJ, and Chris for joining us today. If you want to reach out, get in touch by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.